Welcome everybody to today's Webinar 101, Building and Leading High-Performing Workplace Cultures and Teams, part of Fidelity National Title Group's larger leadership development resource curriculum. Glad you could make it today. Okay, let's make a switch here to building teams, building and leading high-performing teams. Some people don't laugh at this cartoon, but it's really funny, so you can chuckle at it. This is what we are not trying to do, and we build and lead teams here. So most work today is being done in teams, right? And I would imagine at your business, your agency, that high levels of cooperation, collaboration, and alignment between the different functionalities is so important for you to exceed the customer satisfaction and customer experience every day, right? So most work today is done in teams. It's a skill and capability that managers and leaders have to have. And folks, a couple things here. You can't just hire great people, put them on a basketball court or put them in a room and sprinkle magic team building fairy dust on them. And some managers think, oh, I'll just hire great people and somehow magically you'll build a team. And I think if you've been around a while, you know this in sports and in business, it just isn't so. And so building teams intentionally requires separate skill sets for your management leadership team, and I'll review a few of those right here for you. So let's make a distinction between a team and a horde, and I'll talk about these guys in just a second. A horde is a group of individuals who are largely concerned about their own selves. And, if the horde wins, then they feel good. But if the horde loses, hey, I did my job. And, at least my work was done and I was a success. So a horde I would call largely as a group of individuals who's mostly concerned about how they look and about themselves. And they're pretty self-oriented versus a team where there's this high esprit de corps, this commitment, there's alignment to clear goals. People are clear on the roles and responsibilities. And really the I always gets deferred to the we. So I'll say a little bit about a team versus a horde. So think about that right now at your business. Do you have a high-powered team or do you just have a horde of heroes? This picture here, I hate to beat these guys up. This is the 2004 Olympic Dream Team that turned out to only get a bronze medal. So just a little bit of history here. Is in the late 80s, the Olympic Committee decided that in basketball, you could have your pro basketball players join the Olympic team. So up to that point, I think the best the U.S. had ever done in Olympics is maybe bronze. But that first Olympics in '92, we are able to bring in our NBA stars. And of course, if you remember, if you're old enough, we crushed it. Long story short, 3 back-to-back gold medals and had never lost a game, not even lost a game. And in fact, won most games by big numbers until these guys came along, 2004. Now, some people say they didn't have the caliber of other teams, Michael Jordan, but look at these guys. They're still NBA stars. They're great players. And, it was just assumed they're going to win a gold medal. Well, these guys ended up taking a bronze. Huge disappointment. They got beat in their first game by Puerto Rico by 19 points. By Puerto Rico, did I say that? Tremendous disappointment. There's been much research and written about these guys, but it was really a horde of individuals at the end of the day, mostly concerned about themselves. They just never really gelled and got aligned on the team mission here. So let's just level set. How do we know I have a high-performing team versus a group of individuals or a horde, for Pete's sake? Members are highly motivated and committed. Superior, consistent team performance, not these big peaks and lows in business productivity. Again, individuals defer to the team. There's a high we versus I pronoun orientation. You can listen to the language. If your people largely say I, you probably have more of a horde than the team. So I really look for the pronoun we to be operationalized in organizations. High trust and support. We know this to be true. There's empathy for each other. It's not a real Darwinian culture. There's social and emotional intelligence going on, and people really deeply care about their colleagues and teammates. And really importantly, this leads to safely speaking up. I'll say more about this. And they take risks. They don't avoid conflict, and they know how to constructively confront one another in appropriate ways. And they're highly efficient. There's very little waste in the workplace as well. So just some behavior and evidence. Do you have a high-performing team? There's your checklist. Are these things in effect? Let me shut my window one moment. Excuse me. Okay, a little bit more about myself, background, and a little bit more about teams. So I was a mountaineering rock climbing instructor for the Pacific Crest Outward Bound School in California in the Sierra Mountains. I led groups to tops for mountain peaks. Obviously, this is Mount Shasta in Northern California. And so I got really interested in the capability of building and leading teams because I had to. You know, these are hazardous environments. There's a lot of things that can go wrong. And so I spent a lot of time thinking about leading and building teams and giving people the tools, knowledge, and capabilities to be successful in a wide range of environments and to make sure people's physical and emotional safety was never put at risk. And I always thought about this because we say in business, right, well, there's no I in team. That's true, but there are 3 I's in the individual. And I say that because if the individual in the team does not feel successful, growing, and capable in their ability to contribute, so therefore training becomes very important to the individual and the team as a whole. But also, if the team member doesn't feel part of the team, doesn't feel safe, they're not individually committed, because commitment is largely an individual experience. And so I think it's really important, again, that we just don't put a group of people together and think somehow a managerial team is going to happen, that the individuals have to be brought along as well. So I've always found you should be a balance between coaching, training, and developing, recognizing and rewarding the individuals and the team as a whole. So that's why building teams, I think, is a little more is a more complex skill set than possibly we give it credence for. And again, you know, for the team to be successful and safe, just to reinforce here, that you have to teach and train each person individually to have the skill sets, capabilities. And so in the business environment, I still brought this to the restaurant world. I still bring this to my orientation to my clients and businesses out there in a wide range of industries, is that managers and leaders, you should be spending, you know, a regular amount of time with one-on-ones, coaching and developing your folks to making sure they're engaged and clear about your expectations and where the business is going, and do they have the capabilities to exceed your performance expectations. So thoughts on I versus we in the team building. Okay, let's be pragmatic here. So let's say that, Steve, okay, you're on board here with this building leading teams. I think it is more complex and I've given it credence to. Where do I begin? How do I start? I'm going to share with you a model, the GRPI model. This is an open source model. I think it was created in the 70s. It's an open, you know, you can Google this. There's a lot of kind of variations of it. But it's like situational leadership and other models out there that have strong shelf life. It has a wide range of applicability. It's not all complete for all situations, but it's a great starting point for building the skill set of building and leading high-performing teams. So it's a GRPI leadership step. It's an acronym. Obviously, G stands for goals. R is roles and responsibilities. P is processes, and I is interpersonal. So how do you approach building a group or a horde into a team? You start at the top. So with the GRPI model, it says that this is what separates high-performing teams from average-performing teams is high-performing teams are clear on the goal, the purpose, the mission, the strategy, and committed to it. So when we build teams, we always start with the question, why do we exist? What are we trying to accomplish? Why is this important, and how are we going to do that? So that's what we call it a step. Step one, start with the goals of the team. Are they clear about what we're up to here? And you have to take your time for this. So these are also known, whether it's a sports team or a business team, we're acknowledging that all teams have these basic dimensions. And these dimensions require leadership intent and focus in articulating with the group. Again, we're co-creating the team, so they need to opt in and buy into the process. So we start with a conversation about goals, purpose, and meaning, and we engage the team there. Next becomes roles and responsibilities. Are people clear of their lanes? Where does their formal authority begin and end? Where does their, how as an individual am I going to be measured and evaluated on my performance contributions and rewarded or compensated on them? So that's the I in the team here. Is everybody clear? P, processes. How are we going to make decisions? Project management, How are we going to resolve conflict? What communication platforms and channels, email, texting, community boards, Google Drive, etc., will we use for what? So clarifying the processes of how we're going to get the work done and communicate progress against expectations. And I, as interpersonal expectations, I think I like that bottom bullet point there, ground rules. What are the ground rules for when we come together as a team? And this is so important when we forget this as leaders, but very important for building teams. What are our ground rules for our interpersonal behaviors and expectations? You know, trust, honesty, you know, listening, respect, you know, those core ground rules that we can all agree on becomes very important. So that's GRPI. All teams, according to the GRPI model, have these 4 primary dimensions, and all these dimensions the leader is constantly with the team attending to make sure we get those right. So when things go south or sideways, what they often do, where do we go? You can see over on the left side there, the planning arrow is pointed down. That's what we just went through. So when you're planning your team and building the team and planning out your projects, your initiatives, and the things you're trying to accomplish, you start at the top and go down. So you start with goals and go down to ground rules and interpersonal. Troubleshooting, you go up. So what do I mean by this? Folks that have studied conflict in organizations and teams largely agree that the majority of conflict, like 80% of conflict in teams, is a result of unclarity around goals. Think about that for a second. Majority of conflict is around goals. They say like 80%. Noel Tichy at the University of Michigan studies this. 80% of conflict is a result of unclear goals. Of that remaining 20% of conflict on teams, the 80% of that is a result of unclear roles and responsibilities. Now think about that for a second. Have you ever been on a team where you've been frustrated? And think about the source of your frustration. Yeah, you may not get along with someone else in the team member. That's not unusual. But many times it's a result of you're just not clear of the goals and the outcomes or your roles and responsibilities. So that feels pretty right to most folks out there who have been part of a team. It's just this lack of clarity about what are we up to and how are we getting there and what's my lane and what's everyone else's responsibilities. So I think if we pause and think on that, it makes a lot of sense. Here's the dilemma though, right? When there's conflict on a team, where do most managers intervene at? At the top or the bottom? The bottom. Don't they go into, well, Jennifer and Larry, they've never gotten along. So they address that conflict or that at the interpersonal level, and that's usually the least effective place to go. So if you have conflict on your teams, Mr. and Mrs. Manager Leader, go up to goals and engage people in the conversation. Are people clear about the goals, what we're trying to accomplish, and roles and responsibilities? That's usually the most effective part. Stop to a troubleshoot is up there. Does that make sense? So we plan top down and we troubleshoot. We plan top down and we also troubleshoot top down as well, even though it says troubleshooting arrow goes up. Hope that makes sense to you. Okay, that's the GRPI leadership steps. 4 dimensions all teams happen. Teams don't just get better, they work at getting better, and leaders and managers initiate and lead this development process. So here's a very important element that is tied to the interpersonal or group norms part of the GRPI model. I want us to appreciate this, how important this is. The number 1 condition for high-performing teams is this concept known as psychological safety. Amy Edmondson, in her great book, Teaming, made this popular. Google has studied that at their organization, and they've come up with in the operational definition is a shared belief held by team members that the team is safe for interpersonal risk-taking. Think about that for a second. So we say, and we all believe, and we know it to be true, that what's the most important thing in a high-performing work culture and team? Trust, right? We can all agree on that, trust. Well, let's break that down. And trust, according to the authors that study, is this idea of psychological safety, where I trust the environment. It's safe enough for me to speak up. So why is this so important? Well, think about it for a second. If people don't feel safe speaking up, where are your ideas and contributions coming from all these smart people you hired for continuous improvement effort? And how are you going to improve your products and services and exceed the customer experience? Through ideas. And so if people don't feel safe, if there's not trust in the work environment, your culture and team, and you lack psychological safety, what do you have? And we've been part of those teams before. You get crickets is what you get. Or you get the same two people who are sucking up all the oxygen in the room, right? People that are doing all the talking all the time. If you don't have full contribution from all your folks on a regular basis, in other words, people generally speak about the same amount at your team meetings and so forth, then there's a good probability that you don't have psychological safety or trust in your work environment. So it's a metric that you can easily measure by to the degree that everyone on your team is speaking up and contributing ideas, solutions for significant problems or innovation opportunities. So this idea of psychological safety, this is really where we're going with the GRPI leadership step. And just appreciate why the interpersonal or ground rules at the bottom are so important. And that management models those and enforces those. Now on that note, for me, I can tell when we've moved from a horde of hero individuals, mostly concerned with themselves, to a high-performing team is this. And I've noticed this with my mountaineering groups as well, is that when the team members start holding each other accountable for their behaviors and performance, that's when you have a team. As long as the team continually looks up to the leader or manager, the formal leader or manager, to solve problems, resolve conflict, and spoon feed people ideas, you probably don't have a team, or you have a team that's at a very low performing level and they're not at a high performing level. So think about those two metrics or criteria. Think about your team or group of employees right now. Do people contribute pretty consistently and with equality, with equity across the environment? And do the team members call each other out on violations of their culture? If those things aren't happening, there's a good odds are you got some work to do in terms of culture and team building. And those are pretty trusted pathways for moving forward. Okay, so the psychological safety, we have to appreciate it's not a paint by numbers. It's messy, it's organized chaos, but be clear, this is what's happening in these high-performing groups and teams. Ongoing two-way communication, not one-way, obviously. Emotional conversations. This is that emotional intelligence and that social empathy part of high-performing teams, that there's a certain amount of personality, vulnerability that's happening. In other words, people have close, trusting relationships. There's that level of empathy for people. People don't quickly shoot the messenger, and shoot people down, try to one-up each other. Those are hordes. And so the social bond of the team is very important, and it takes time to cultivate. Okay, that is it, folks, on 101 part culture building and team building for high-performing, strong workplace cultures, part of Fidelity National Title Group's ongoing leadership and development curriculum. I so appreciate you taking the time today to sit through the webinar. If you want additional free resources and tools, you can go to my website, www.steverudolphcoaching.com, free resources and tools. I'm constantly upgrading those. I'm going to make some available, some PDFs from these slides, some actual worksheets for you to help you step-by-step go through building culture and team at your workplace, so stay tuned for that. I really appreciate you joining us today, and much continued success. Keep it simple, keep it focused, and definitely keep it inspiring. Have a great day.